This is Craig with Carshalton Advisory. In this video, we're going to go over the Objective 3.4 practice tasks for the Microsoft Office Specialist 2016 Study Guide for Microsoft Excel Expert. Let's get started. For this set of practice tasks, we're going to be wanting to be working on the break-even tab of our 3.4 workbook. And on this tab, we're going to be using the goal seek function. And what we want to do is figure out the number of units, which is this value here in C4. So the number of units that need to be sold in order to break even. So that is where our profit is equal to 0. So here's our profit in C12. We want that to be equal to 0, and we're going to use the goal seek function. So we're on our home tab right now. What we're going to do is move over to our data tab. And within the data tab, in our forecast section, we're going to choose what if analysis. Under the what if, we're going to select goal seek. And this is our goal seek dialog box. So we want to set cell C12, which is our profit. We want it to equal 0. And we're going to do that by changing the number of units sold. So that is going to be C4. So just confirm that. So we want C4 to end up at 0 by changing the value in C4. We'll click OK. And it took a split second there. We'll click all right. And so now we can see that if there are 46,468 units sold, our profit will be 0. 1 unit less than that, our profit will be negative. 1 unit more than that, and our profit will be positive. So you can use goal seek for a lot of things. We used to use them to identify bid prices. So if we wanted a project to have a let's say a 15% internal rate of return, what do we need the bid price to be? And so we would use the goal seek rather than iterate it ourselves. Now we could have if we wanted to. I'm going to hit undo to go to where we were at before. If I wanted this to be 0, I could have gone up here and changed this to say 75,000. All right, we're getting closer. 60,000. So as you can see, it can take a little bit of time. So I'm going to go to 40,000 now. And now I'm too little. Let's try 45,000. So what goal seek does is it iterates a whole bunch of different values very, very rapidly in order to get to the target that we want. Much faster than we could do it on our own. So that task is wrapped up. We'll move on to our next task here. In this case, we are going to be using the scenario analysis. So I'm going to control page down to go to my next tab in our workbook. So this is our mortgage analysis. And what we need to do is use the scenario function in order to have 3 different scenarios that we can rapidly view or compare between. So this also is in the data tab, also under what if analysis. And this time we're going to go to Scenario Manager. All right, so what we want to do is add a new scenario. And we are going to call this best case. Now, as a quick aside here, be careful when you call things best case. I ran into numerous situations where best case gets interpreted as best guess. So a lot of times this will go up to other managers and it'll be like, oh, this is our most likely case. And it's like, no, best case is kind of the most optimistic. So I would always try and use alternative language so there wasn't ever any confusion. I would maybe call this most optimistic or something like that, just so that there wasn't any potential for the best case, which is kind of the best that could ever happen, not necessarily the most likely to happen. So in this case, we're going to call this one best case, as that's what they've directed us to do. And we're going to do it by changing the cells in this section here. So C7 through C9. And you can add a comment here as far as describing the scenario. And I always recommend that just because when you maybe a month, maybe 6 months, maybe a year before you or someone else looks at this, and you might have forgotten why you made these particular assumptions. So we're going to click OK here. Now it's asking us, well, what do you want these values to be? So in this case, the default is what we wanted. So for best case, we want a $20,000 down payment, a 20-year term, which is the C8 value, and a $100 pay down. So that's okay. Now let's add another one. It automatically defaults to the same changing cells. So we're going to call this worst case. We're going to change the same cells. We'll click OK here. So now we want to use our next iteration here. So that's a $10,000 down payment, a 30-year term, and a 0 pay down. So we can either click OK here and go back to the other dialog box, or I can go straight to Add, and this automatically moves me to adding a new scenario while saving the last one. So we're going to call this likeliest case. It defaults to the same cells. We'll click OK. This time, we want a $15,000 down payment, a 30-year term, or excuse me, a 25-year term, and a $50. And I'm going to do that minus just to match up with what the original was. All right, so now in my scenario case, you can see our three scenarios: best case, worst case, likeliest case. And so what we want to do is, by toggling through these, it will give us the results for each of these scenarios. So best case is already highlighted. Let's go to worst case. And what I'm going to do is click show. And you're going to notice the values in this section here are going to be different. Likeliest case, let's click show. And again, we have a third version. You want to see best case again? No worries. We can click best case. Now I can close this. Now if I want to, I can throw in some other changes. 15 years here, let's go minus 250. And so I might iterate or try and find some other solutions to this problem. But if I go back into the scenario manager, it's going to have our three memorized cases already in here. So I can just go to best case, click show, and it's going to return that to these, I don't want to call them default since we have multiple, but to these pre-specified values. So this can be a good option for you if you have a particular set of guidelines that wherever you're working likes to adhere to. Let's have a $10 per unit price. You could have it in our scenario. Now you can go in and make other adjustments and try different prices, but you can always kind of go back or show one of your other colleagues what that default value is by going into Scenario Manager. That wraps up the practice task for section 3.4. Now a note here. There are no CubeSet functions in the practice examples, in the practice tasks. My experience with the exam is that there was a cube formula question in there. What you need to decide is if you're willing to forgo that question and get it wrong in order to spend more time studying other areas that you're more likely to grasp. It becomes a little bit of a strategic question for you. They're not going to get it reviewed in this set of videos. But be aware that you may want to go back into this section of the chapter and get a better grasp of it. I don't know if that's what my call personally would be. I think you may be better off mastering some of the other things in this textbook that are more likely to be quizzed more than once. But ultimately, that's a question up that's for you to answer. And I wish you luck whichever way you choose. But that wraps up section 3.4. Lots of great stuff in this chapter. It's a shame it was handled so poorly. But make sure to subscribe so you'll be up to date when the next set of 3-5 objective videos are released. Thanks so much for watching. This is Craig with Carshalton Advisory.